The greatest battlefield in your life is not the place you work, the people around you, or even the struggles you see. The greatest battlefield is your own mind. Every limitation, every fear, every insecurity, every defeat begins not in your circumstances, but in your thoughts. If your mind is uneducated, your spirit can be powerful, your potential can be great, but your life will still be small, because your life will never rise higher than your thoughts. You cannot live beyond what your mind believes is possible. The mind is not just a place where ideas are stored. It is the workshop where your destiny is designed. That's why the most dangerous ignorance is not lack of schooling. It is the lack of mental discipline. You can have degrees and still be a slave to fear. You can have certificates and still be poor in vision. Because education is not information, it is transformation. You can read 1,000 books and still think like a victim if your mind is not renewed. The Bible says, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That means your entire life is waiting for your mind to catch up with what God already put inside you. You see, God never created you to be defeated, but He gave you a mind so you could manage victory. That's why the enemy doesn't have to destroy your body. He just needs to occupy your thoughts. If he can poison your perspective, he can paralyze your purpose. Many people lose battles that never even began simply because they surrendered mentally. You cannot pray your way out of what you continue to think yourself into. If you keep imagining failure, your faith will have no foundation. That's why it's not enough to pray for blessings. You must train your mind to receive them. If your mind rejects success, even God can't make it stay. Your thoughts are like soil. Whatever you plant in them grows. If you plant fear, fear multiplies. If you plant faith, faith expands. Whatever dominates your thoughts will direct your future. So when you pray for change, make sure your mind is educated enough to handle it. An educated mind doesn't mean a proud mind. It means a trained, disciplined, spiritually aligned mind that can filter what enters it. Your thoughts are gates to your destiny, and every gate needs a guard. When you allow toxic thoughts, resentment, doubt, jealousy, comparison to enter unchecked, they take root like weeds and choke your vision. That's why you must become a guardian of your mental garden. If you don't train your mind, the world will train it for you. The media will shape your fears, people will shape your opinions, culture will shape your values, and before long, you'll live a life that doesn't even belong to you. You'll become a product of what you consume instead of a producer of what you believe. A mind without discipline becomes a slave to distraction. It starts strong but never finishes. It dreams but never decides. It plans but never produces. And that's how many people die full of potential, full of dreams, full of purpose, but empty of results. You see, your mind is like a steering wheel. Your emotions are like passengers, but your spirit is the driver. If your mind is not educated to obey your spirit, your emotions will take control and drive your life into chaos. That's why some people know the truth, but still live in bondage. They have spiritual understanding, but mental immaturity. God can't bless you beyond the level your mind can manage. If your mind is fearful, God can't trust you with influence. If your mind is undisciplined, He can't trust you with authority. Because blessings without mental capacity become burdens. That's why many people pray for promotion, but are never prepared for it. They want success, but their thinking is still small. They ask for opportunity, but their mind still doubts their worth. So God waits until your mind is educated enough to handle what He's already planned to give you. Education of the mind begins with awareness. You must first recognize that your thoughts have power. Every day, you are training your mind either consciously or by default. Every word you repeat, every fear you entertain, every image you imagine, it's all programming your belief system. And your belief system becomes your reality. If you keep thinking you can't, your mind will find evidence to prove it. If you believe you're not worthy, your behavior will align with that belief. That's why you can't afford to think carelessly. Mental laziness is spiritual suicide. A person who refuses to think critically will always depend on others to interpret life for them. You must train your mind to think above the noise, to think with purpose, to think with clarity, to think with truth. Because the moment your mind aligns with your purpose, your entire life starts to shift. You must also understand that your mind is a battlefield of two voices, the voice of faith and the voice of fear. One tells you what God promised. The other reminds you of what people said. Yeah. One pushes you toward destiny, the other drags you toward defeat. Every day you must choose which one you'll listen to. The education of your mind is not a one-time decision, it's a daily discipline. You must constantly feed it truth until truth becomes its default setting. Because whatever you feed your mind becomes its appetite. If you feed it negativity, it will crave more negativity. But if you feed it faith, it will hunger for possibilities. That's why great people don't think about problems. They think about purpose. They don't focus on what's missing, they focus on what's possible. Because they've trained their minds to interpret challenges as opportunities. An educated mind doesn't panic when life gets hard. It doesn't crumble when people leave. It doesn't fear when the economy shakes. Because it understands that every storm is a test, every pain is a teacher, and every delay is a design. When your mind is educated, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding spiritually. You stop asking, why me? And start declaring, try me, because you understand that what's happening to you is actually happening for you. The mind is the tool that turns trials into training. When you educate your mind, you stop seeing problems as punishment. You start seeing them as preparation. The difference between those who quit and those who conquer is not strength. It's mindset. Do you know why most people never walk into their destiny? Because they never renew the mental picture of who they are. They keep seeing themselves through the lens of failure, rejection, or comparison. They keep replaying the same old story, and their life becomes a reflection of it. You cannot become new while thinking old. If you want to walk in freedom, you must first think in freedom. That's why transformation begins not with environment, but with mindset. God can change your situation in a second, but if your mind is still stuck in the past, you'll bring old habits into new blessings. That's why He often allows us to go through seasons of testing, not to destroy us, but to develop our thinking. Because He knows if He can educate your mind, He can elevate your life. When your mind is educated, you no longer need validation to move forward. You stop waiting for people to approve what God already called you to do. You stop explaining your vision to small thinkers. You stop doubting your own progress because someone else doesn't understand it. You become anchored in truth, not emotions. That's the power of mental education. It creates internal stability in an unstable world. When your mind is trained, storms can come, but you remain calm. People can betray you, but you still have peace. Things can fall apart, but you still have focus. Because you've learned that your power doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. To educate your mind means to take responsibility for what you believe. To no longer accept every thought as truth. To challenge your assumptions. To ask, is this thought helping my destiny or hindering it? You must interrogate your own thinking. Because many times, your greatest enemy is not the devil, it's the mental patterns you've accepted as normal. Fear is a thought, doubt is a thought, worry is a thought. These are not realities, they are choices. And you have the authority to replace them with truth. Every time a negative thought arises, you can choose to reject it and replace it with faith. That's what it means to educate your mind. You become intentional about what you allow to live in it. And don't forget, your mind learns through repetition. One thought repeated enough becomes a belief. One belief repeated enough becomes a conviction, and convictions shape your reality. So if you want to overcome anything, start by teaching your mind what truth looks like. When your mind is full of truth, lies lose power. When your mind is full of light, darkness has no authority. When your mind is full of faith, fear has nowhere to live. This is how you win every battle, by mastering the battlefield of the mind. Because once your mind is educated in truth, no storm, no failure, no betrayal, no loss can ever defeat you again. You can never overcome what your mind has not accepted as conquerable. Everything that looks impossible is only a reflection of the limits of your current understanding. The truth is, life doesn't get easier. You get stronger. But strength begins in the mind. Every great victory starts as a thought, and every great downfall begins with doubt. Your outer world is simply a mirror of your inner conversation. If your mind is filled with excuses, your life will produce limitations. But if your mind is trained with discipline and faith, it becomes a weapon that no circumstance can defeat. The mind is not meant to be a cage for your fears. It's meant to be a classroom for your growth. Until you educate it, you'll keep repeating lessons life is trying to teach you. Some of the hardest seasons you face are not punishment, they're education. Life will keep presenting the same storm until your mind learns the lesson behind it. Once you understand that, pain stops feeling like prison and starts feeling like preparation. Most people want breakthrough without breakdown, growth without challenge, success without struggle. But that's not how true transformation works. You must teach your mind to see beyond the surface. You must train it to see the hand of purpose even in the middle of chaos. When your mind becomes educated to recognize divine patterns, you stop complaining about trials and start interpreting them. You begin to understand that what you call problems are often the raw materials of your promotion. Every test carries a teaching. Every delay hides a direction. Every loss carries a lesson. The uneducated mind only sees pain. The educated mind sees process. Your ability to overcome anything is not in the power of your hands, but in the posture of your mind. That's why God renews minds before he changes seasons. If he promoted you without renewing your thoughts, your old mentality would sabotage your new position. You can't step into a promised land with a slave mindset. You can't manage abundance with scarcity thinking. You can't live in peace while feeding on chaos. That's why educating your mind is a spiritual act. It's you taking authority over your thoughts and aligning them with truth. It's you refusing to let temporary circumstances define eternal identity. Because your mind was never meant to be controlled by the environment. It was meant to control the environment. When you begin to educate your mind, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding intentionally. You stop being driven by fear and you stop being guided by purpose. Because your thoughts determine your emotions and your emotions direct your actions. If you can educate the thought, you can control the reaction. Most people lose battles not because they lack ability, but because their emotions overrule their reasoning. The educated mind learns how to pause before reacting, how to observe before speaking, how to discern before deciding. That's mental maturity. It's when you understand that not every thought deserves your attention, not every voice deserves your reaction, not every conflict deserves your energy. Education of the mind also means learning to feed it the right substance. You cannot expect peace when you constantly feed on fear. You cannot expect faith when you digest doubt every day. Whatever enters your mind repeatedly becomes your mental diet, and your diet determines your direction. If you keep listening to negativity, your mind will normalize it. If you keep surrounding yourself with complainers, your perspective will shrink. But if you feed your mind with faith, wisdom, and truth, it will start producing stability. Just like the body needs food to stay strong, the mind needs truth to stay free. Freedom is not the absence of problems. It's the presence of understanding. When your mind is educated, even when life hits you hard, you still stand firm because you understand purpose behind pressure. The reason many people stay stuck is because their mind keeps replaying old programs. You cannot overcome the future while your thoughts are still tied to the past. Some people are free physically but prisoners mentally. They left the old season, but they brought the same mindset with them. That's why nothing changes. You must delete old mental files that no longer serve your destiny. You must stop repeating the stories of what hurt you and start reprogramming your mind with what healed you. Your past is not a life sentence. It's a lesson. But if you don't educate your mind to interpret it that way, it will become a chain. An educated mind doesn't avoid struggle, it masters it. It doesn't deny pain, it defines it. It doesn't pretend problems don't exist, it simply refuses to give them power. Because your focus decides your future. When your mind is focused on truth, it sees possibility where others see pain. It sees lessons where others see loss. It sees faith where others see fear. That's the mindset that makes overcomers. Because real victory is not the absence of difficulty, it's the presence of understanding. You see, God doesn't remove challenges because he wants you to learn how to think through them. The test of your faith is not how loud you pray. It's how you think when the prayer seems unanswered. Can you still believe when everything contradicts your belief? Can you still trust when every door seems closed? That's where education of the mind shows its value. Because when your mind is renewed, your faith no longer depends on evidence, it depends on revelation. You start to understand that storms destroy you, they expose your structure. Trials don't break you, they build you. The educated mind doesn't fear the process because it knows the process is proof of purpose. Sometimes you must teach your mind to think differently than how you feel. Feelings are temporary teachers, they are not truthful masters. If you always follow emotion, you'll always drift away from purpose. The educated mind learns to separate temporary emotion from eternal truth. It can feel fear but still choose faith. It can feel pain but still choose purpose. It can feel pressure but still choose progress. That's the power of an educated mind. It gives you control over what controls others. Don't underestimate how powerful your thoughts are. Every change you want in life begins as a decision to think differently. You can't pray for victory while rehearsing defeat in your thoughts. You can't expect peace while meditating on problems. You can't grow while holding on to limiting beliefs. You must constantly teach your mind what truth sounds like until lies become unrecognizable. It's not enough to memorize scripture. You must internalize it. Truth is not powerful until your mind accepts it as reality. That's when you start living from the inside out instead of the outside in. When your mind becomes educated, your language changes. You stop saying, I can't, and stop saying, I will. You stop saying, I'm not enough, and start saying, I'm equipped. You stop saying, this is impossible, and start saying, with God, all things are possible. The language of your mind becomes the language of faith, because words are the evidence of what your mind believes. Educated minds speak life, even in death. They speak peace, even in chaos. They speak purpose, even in pain. That's why your words matter. They are the voice of your thoughts. You must also understand that mental education requires repetition and resistance. Just as muscles grow under pressure, so does the mind. Every challenge you face is a mental gym. Every disappointment is an exercise in endurance. Every failure is training for greater wisdom. Stop running from the lessons life brings and start learning from them. When you face hardship, ask your mind, what is this teaching me? Every time you extract meaning from pain, you expand your strength. Every time you choose gratitude instead of complaining, your mind becomes wiser. Every time you act in faith instead of fear, your mind becomes stronger. Your victory doesn't depend on what happens to you. It depends on what happens in you. Two people can face the same problem, yet one breaks while the other builds. The difference is mindset. The educated mind doesn't ask, why is this happening to me? It asks, what is this producing in me? Because growth is always internal before it becomes external. And once your mind is educated to think like that, you can overcome anything. You can lose everything and still not lose peace. You can fall and still not stay down. Because your strength no longer depends on what you see. It depends on what you know. So start teaching your mind that failure is not final, that pain is not punishment, that delay is not denial, that struggle is not defeat. Train it to think in alignment with truth, not with fear. Because whatever your mind accepts, your life will manifest. You cannot have a victorious life with a defeated mind. If you want to overcome anything, start by overcoming your thinking. The world around you is waiting for the transformation within you. Your mind is the most powerful tool God ever gave you, yet it is also the most dangerous weapon if left untrained. What you tolerate in your mind, you eventually create in your life. That's why it's not enough to pray for victory. You must think like a victor. The uneducated mind will always interpret trials as tragedy, but the educated mind sees them as training. Every hardship you've ever faced wasn't meant to break you. It was meant to build your mental strength. God doesn't allow storms to destroy you. He allows them to develop you. Because every level of destiny demands a higher level of discipline. You can't conquer new mountains with an old mindset. You can't fight new battles with yesterday's beliefs. The mind must evolve before the miracle arrives. That's why every challenge is an invitation from God to think higher. When you face situations that seem impossible, remember this, your thoughts are either the door or the wall to your breakthrough. If you think small, you live small. If you think defeat, you attract defeat. But when you think with faith, heaven begins to align with your thoughts. Because faith doesn't start in your heart, it starts in your mind. Your mind gives your faith permission to move. You can have all the potential in the world, but until your mind believes it, you'll never see it. That's why the education of the mind is not about learning facts. It's about unlocking faith. Once your mind is educated in faith, fear loses its authority. Once your mind understands purpose, pain loses its power. Once your mind sees destiny, distractions lose their voice. Many people ask God to change their lives while refusing to change their minds. But God will never give you what your mindset cannot handle. If you think like a victim, even blessings will feel like burdens. If you think like a loser, even opportunities will look like obstacles. But when your mind is renewed, every closed door becomes a lesson, every loss becomes direction, and every delay becomes development. That's the secret of the overcomer's mindset. It turns everything into advantage. When others quit, the educated mind keeps going. When others fear, it keeps believing. When others fall apart, it stands firm, because it understands that the same fire that burns others is the fire that purifies gold. You must realize that the education of your mind is not something the world can give you. It's something the Spirit teaches you through experience. Sometimes God isolates you not to punish you, but to reprogram your thoughts. He removes voices around you so that you can hear the truth within you. Because when your mind is cluttered with noise, you can't receive revelation. Silence is the classroom of transformation. When you sit in quiet reflection, your mind begins to understand that every season of your life was connected. Every struggle had meaning. Every disappointment was divine direction. The educated mind learns to trust even what it doesn't yet understand. It learns to rest in truth, not react to fear. When your mind reaches that place, nothing can shake you. The economy can fall, relationships can end, plans can change, but you remain anchored because your stability no longer depends on what's around you. It depends on what's within you. The educated mind doesn't panic when things collapse. It rebuilds with wisdom. It doesn't crumble under pressure. It finds purpose under pain. Because the mind that's educated by truth no longer lives by emotion. It lives by revelation, and revelation gives birth to resilience. Once your mind knows who you are and what you carry, no force of darkness can convince you otherwise. Understand this: overcoming doesn't mean you won't feel fear. It means fear will no longer control your decisions. It doesn't mean you'll never fall. It means you'll rise faster every time you do. It doesn't mean the storms will stop. It means you'll start walking on them. Because an educated mind doesn't run from problems. It rises above them. It turns every "I can't" into "I will." It turns every "maybe someday" into "today is the day." It turns every "what if I fail" into "what if I fly." That's the mindset of champions. That's how ordinary people do extraordinary things, by thinking differently when everyone else gives up. The more your mind grows in truth, the less control circumstances have over you, because the only real prison is mental. If you free your thoughts, you free your life. That's why some people live in palaces but are still bound, while others live in scarcity but walk in peace. It's not the condition, it's the cognition. Freedom begins when your mind learns that you are not what happened to you, you are what you choose to believe about what happened. The educated mind stops replaying old pain and stops rewriting new purpose. It refuses to let trauma define identity. It takes control of narrative and aligns it with destiny. That's how healing happens from the inside out. When you begin to educate your mind like that, you become unstoppable. Obstacles become opportunities, fear becomes fuel, and failure becomes feedback. You stop seeking easy paths and start choosing meaningful ones. Because an educated mind knows that nothing truly valuable is ever birthed in comfort. Diamonds are made under pressure, and so are overcomers. Every time your mind chooses faith over fear, you sharpen your strength. Every time your mind chooses gratitude over grumbling, you build your peace. Every time your mind chooses vision over victimhood, you move closer to destiny. So if you want to overcome anything, pain, fear, failure, doubt, you must start here with your thoughts. Guard them like treasure. Feed them truth. Challenge them with wisdom. Direct them with purpose. Because your mind is not a mirror of your circumstances, it's the mold of your future. If you want to change your life, you must first educate your thoughts. The moment you win in your mind, victory in life becomes inevitable. And now listen closely. The reason you've survived everything that was meant to destroy you is because God has been training your mind all along. Every disappointment that didn't break you was a lesson. Every storm that didn't drown you was preparation. Every delay that frustrated you was development. You didn't fail, you were being educated. And now, it's time to graduate. It's time to think higher, live bolder, and walk stronger. Because when your mind is educated by truth, nothing can defeat you again. Your future is not waiting for a miracle, it's waiting for a mindset. The world doesn't change when your situation improves. It changes when your thinking transforms. Educate your mind until your thoughts speak faith louder than fear, until your vision becomes greater than your pain, until your peace becomes stronger than your problems. Because once your mind awakens to truth, your life will follow in power. You were never created to be a prisoner of circumstance. You were born to be a master of mindset. Educate your mind and you will overcome anything.